Ready? Let's go ahead and start. So we'll start with a little the motivation. Before we generate a positive motivation, then let's try to focus our attention. So focus your mind inwards and practice placement meditation for a minute or so, just watching our breath or our mind or another object of concentration. Try to let go of any distractions and just let your awareness be in the present moment, where observing your mind or your breath. Mm. And then to generate a positive motivation, let's if you like, then imagine yourself surrounded by all sentient beings, beginning with your kind mother and father. So usually we visualize our mother of this life to our imagine her seated at our immediate left, and then all of our female friends and family. Imagine them seated to our left and behind us, meditating together with oneself. So your grandmothers, aunts, sisters, and so forth. Bring them to mind. And then imagine all your male family and friends at your right, beginning with your father of this life, your immediate right, and then your grandfathers, uncles, brothers, male friends and family, so forth. Imagine them all to your right and behind you. And then imagine those whom you're most prone to become irritated or angry with, seated directly in front of you, a little lower, facing towards you. So the purpose of thinking of these people is to remind ourselves that we have to put special effort into practicing patience, forgiveness, and kindness towards those whom we find most irritating and provoking. And then imagine all the other sentient beings, all the other humans whom we don't have a special affinity for or a special aversion to. So those who are like strangers to us. Imagine them all, both human beings, animals, and whatever kinds of beings exist with a mind. Imagine them all seated around us, as vast as space, or around oneself. Mm. So then the purpose of visualizing like this is to include all sentient beings in our motivation. So generating a positive motivation, then first think for oneself what you aspire to gain or to achieve by participating in this session, and try to connect that with your longest term and highest aspirations for what you feel or believe is possible for yourself. And then also shorter term, goals and aspirations. Mm. And then try to expand that sense of concern or wishing to achieve the well-being, not only of oneself, but and to free from suffering, not only oneself, but others. Um, so you can, yeah, you could spend the rest of your life thinking about this. But in a few minutes, yeah, focus on however you like. But maybe it's helpful to think about, especially because this session is on Buddhism and the climate crisis. So thinking about, yeah, well, we're going to discuss different ways to think about, approach the whole climate, global warming and the climate crisis. So yeah, make that part of your motivation. So one thing I find helpful is just think of all the different people who are suffering so much because of climate change, from people suffering from increasing natural disasters and the strength of natural disasters, from floods, hurricanes, more fires, drought, and then resulting famine and homelessness and so forth. And then all the animals. There's so much extinction of animals. Their natural habitats being gradually shrunk and destroyed. And so increased competition among animals and more difficulty surviving, as well as in the oceans with the warming of the oceans. So thinking about the suffering of these countless humans and animals, then yeah, one way to think is that by whatever we do here tonight, discussing the climate crisis, environmental crisis, then may that all become part of a solution to reducing this kind of, yeah, all the harm that comes from the way we're affecting the environment through pollution. And then finally, before we start, then you can, so usually in Buddhism, we make a request, do different prayers, and then at the end, make a request for the blessings of the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. But whatever object of faith that you have, if you have one, then try to bring that to mind and request their blessing, to be able to, you know, gain insight through this, what we do in this session, and thereby come closer to a solution to problems. Okay, so we can continue with the main body of the session now. Um, yeah. So I think last week I said the session was going to be on more on compassion or altruism or something, but I was mixing that up with the course I'm leading on Sunday mornings. And well, I was also thinking about other research I wanted to get to. But actually, this session is on the climate crisis. So we planned. And then next week will be on the sort of secular ethics, His Holiness vision for secular ethics. Yeah, and a little bit maybe universal education. Let's see, Lama Yeshe's vision of universal education. So if you remember, then I think we just had two previous sessions now. Last week was about some research on, yeah, the benefits of meditation specifically. And then the previous week was on comparing the Buddhist view of the eight worldly concerns and the kind of, from psychology, a view of, well, materialistic values versus inner values. Um, so tonight, yeah, there's there's these, these kind of presentations I'm making in this course, they're not things I usually talk about. So I'm not as confident, and maybe not as well organized as when I talk about just standard kind of Buddhist topics. Um, so, um, but I enjoy learning, doing research and learning about these topics and thinking about how to, in this case, relate the science related to, and the data related to global warming and climate destruction to different Buddhist ideas. Now, looking up for this session, I looked up just a little bit about what His Holiness the Dalai Lama has said about it, what Lama Zopa Rinpoche has said about. Um, so, and then yeah, but in each case, like tonight again, there's so many different ways you can go to talk about. There's so many different kind of angles. You could easily have a whole year-long course just about this topic alone. So I'm not sure where my talk's going to go tonight, but I'll try to. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting wherever it goes. So maybe just some general ideas. Well, maybe let's start with a quote from His Holiness. So for tonight, actually, I put together a PowerPoint, just a very rough PowerPoint presentation. And it starts with, well, great. So a couple quotes from His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So I'll read those first, and then maybe just talk about some general ideas. Yeah, how Buddhism's related. Maybe how Buddhism has maybe some unique perspectives on the causes of the current kind of global warming, climate crisis, and then and different solutions, ways of looking for solutions. So His Holiness says. So I was really impressed by this quote because it's in 1988. No, His Holiness is already very aware of the ecological crisis. 1988. I mean, I was born in 1973, so I was like 15. It wasn't on my mind for the next 10 years probably after that. I had no idea. But here His Holiness is saying something very pertinent about the whole crisis. Yeah, I'm not sure where the venue, but anyway, His Holiness said, peace and the survival of life on earth as we know it are threatened by human activities that lack a commitment to humanitarian values. Destruction of nature. So he could be as well talking about the whole, nuclear weapons there, but he's not. No, he's talking about the climate, well, destruction of our natural world, natural resources. Destruction of nature and natural resources results from ignorance, greed, and lack of respect for Earth's living things. So that's very classic Buddhist view. Ignorance. I mean, in Buddhism, all suffering arises from ignorance. And then, and so here it's a very specific kind of ignorance. Ignorance can mean different things. Like, there's just like the ignorance of how to use a laptop computer. Now is one kind of ignorance. So here, ignorance, it could be just ignorance of how, well, at that time, I'm not sure how good the science was, but definitely like in the 60s, 50s, 60s. Well, I'm not sure when was the first understanding arose that carbon dioxide is causing the temperature of the atmosphere to warm. But definitely sometime in the past when we're burning a lot of fossil fuels, there was ignorance, not knowing that there's that correlation, not knowing that's going to be an effect. So that's one kind of ignorance. Or like, Yeah, I still want to watch the movie The Graduate, starring Dustin Hoffman, because apparently, um, exactly, plastics. I still haven't watched it, but I've seen a few little clips, and I remember he's what is it? He's like somehow related to some big industrialist who's making plastics, and it's a new thing at that time, making plastics. Is it? Yeah. So yeah, but I mean, probably at the beginning when people are first making plastics, they don't realize like if we keep pumping out plastics, it's going to end up everywhere, like in our bodies, in the clouds, in the water, everywhere. So that's another kind of ignorance, not realizing how our human activity dramatically affects the environment, the natural resources and the environment that we depend upon. But in Buddhism, usually when you talk about ignorance, they're thinking about the ignorance, which is the root cause of all suffering, which is a specific way of grasping at how we as people exist primarily, which is a sort of reification of our, as an individual person, of our independence, our existing as independent from anything else, from any other person, from anything like the earth, the air, the water, the plants, our food, um, and also so we grasp at ourselves as existing independent from our idea of a self, of ourself. So whereas in actuality, what we are as a person is not one concrete, unchanging thing that exists by its own side, but rather, we exist in a way independence upon a story, that we create independence upon our body and all the thoughts that arise in our mind. We have, all the different parts of our body, which are not us, and which directly physically depend upon, the natural environment, our body. And then we have all the contents of our mental experiences, our emotions, our thoughts, our feelings, our memories, our perceptions with our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and our body. So all these mental experiences, which are changing all the time, and none of which is us, the person. So on that whole collection of different phenomena, physical phenomena and mental phenomena, it's like a big collection of different parts that's changing all the time. But on that we label I, and because there's some similarity from one moment to the next in that collection, it has its own kind of continuity whereby it's different from other things. Then we label I, but we don't think that we don't see that we've labeled this sense of I on that collection. We think that the I exists from its own side, somewhere from within that collection. Anyway, but and so because of that reified sense of independence as a self, then we consider other people and the world, the external world, as other than us and less important. And that's why then we get ego. I'm more important because I'm I, and others are less important because they're not I. No. And then we get conflict, right? And attachment to things we want, and things we don't like, aversion. And there's a sense of disconnectedness from the external world, and then discaring, not caring about the external world. So that's the kind of ignorance His Holiness most likely has in mind when he says this. So destruction of nature and the natural resources result from ignorance, and there from ignorance arises greed, right, for what we want. And greed is something where we like something, we want it, and we don't care about how our getting it affects anybody else. It doesn't matter. It's totally selfish emotion. So it results from ignorance, greed, and then lack of respect for the earth's living things. So that's another kind of not caring about how our actions affect others. Like imagine where I grew up in Virginia, in Williamsburg, Virginia, near the James River. There's two big famous rivers. If you studied American history, the James River and the York River, named after King James, and York something, I don't know, English people. But in the James River, when I was growing up, because at one point we had a boat and we'd go water skiing, but you couldn't eat fish from the James River because it's polluted, because there are paper mills upstream that were just dumping for years, and other kinds of factories just dumping chemicals into the river. So it was even sketchy about swimming in it, but we did. But you couldn't eat fish or eat any of the shellfish. So I'm sure you all remember, back in I guess probably the 60s, 70s, 80s, there wasn't so much conscientiousness about how industries are using the waterways. And so a lot became terribly polluted. But then in the 80s, 90s, it became much more of an issue, and then laws were passed and regulations enforced. And then now in the US, I think most waterways are relatively clean, to that time. Is it? I don't know. And what about Monterey Bay? I was on the pier the other day, enjoying watching all the sea lions, and you could see a lot of schools of fish in the water. And yeah, when I've been watching along the beach, I saw a bunch of dolphins in Capitola the other day, and whales down in Monterey. It looks like there's quite. I know in the past, like because I read Cannery Row, there were schools, massive schools of sardines. There was a whole sardine industry which was completely wiped out, right? Are there? Yeah, it seems like in one way maybe it's coming back than from before. Like wolves are coming back in Yellowstone, and what is I read about grizzly bears are coming more and more down. I saw in the newspaper I think today, down into like Washington State, Oregon State, lower BC, whereas they were wiped out before. Salmon, I don't know. I used to fish salmon in Alaska, in Kodiak. Um, but there, I think they're still driving down the whole salmon population. Um, anyway, destruction of the natural nature and the natural resources results from ignorance, greed, and a lack of respect for the earth's living things. So yeah, when we don't have a lack, we have a lack of respect for the waterways, for the animals that live in the waterways, for other people who use. It's a common space. There are other people who use the water. So I started talking about that because I was thinking of, try to imagine these people who are running like a paper mill or some other kind of factory upstream in the James River. And when they're knowingly dumping chemicals into the water, what do they think? Like it's not going to affect someone downriver? That's just completely like short-sighted. Or they just don't care is more likely. They just think, oh, it'll wash out into the sea and then dissipate. And then His Holiness goes on, just as we should cultivate gentle and peaceful relations with our fellow human beings, we should also extend that same kind of attitude toward the natural environment. So this I especially liked His Holiness saying, because as a Buddhist practitioner, the first part is standard practice, where he says, just as we should cultivate gentle and peaceful relations with our fellow human beings. So like that visualization, which I just asked you to do at the beginning, where we visualize ourselves surrounded by all sentient beings, beginning with our family and friends, and then looking at those who were most enemies, whom we're most prone to become angry with, and then imagine all of this around. And then so within that visualization, then you practice loving kindness, generating loving kindness for all sentient beings. So, and then compassion as well, and other positive attitudes. So in Buddhism, it's a very standard practice to generate, loving kindness for other sentient beings. But I always had a doubt for a long time about, because it's, because in most uh, meditation instructions, like the Lamrim, classical Buddhist text, it's not described to extend that attitude of caring to the inanimate environment, like to plants or to air or water. Although it's a logical follow on because all those sentient beings depend upon that environment. But it's like because the earth or the trees, well, because the trees are seen as not having a mind, then they can't have happiness. Yeah, that's in Buddhism. That's plants and trees don't have consciousness. Um, but and the water and the rocks and the earth also considered to not have consciousness. Yeah, it's a bit debatable, but anyway, that's the way it's standardly think of. Um, so because those things in the inanimate environment doesn't have consciousness, then it can't experience happiness and can't experience suffering. So therefore, there's no need to wish for it to have. There's no point. It's pointless, in a way, to wish for it to have happiness or wish for it to be suffering. That's one way of thinking of it. But the other way to think of it is if, like we can see very clearly, and as His Holiness points out, if we don't care about the environment, we don't care about plants, um, and the inanimate environment, then we mistreat it and we misuse it. And then that causes a lot of harm to us and to other sentient beings. So it's like the flourishing of living beings depends upon having a healthy environment. That's the basis for their life. No? So like for our physical flourishing, we need clean water, we need clean air, we need quiet places, we need light. Um, We need clean food and healthy food for our vegetables and fruits to be like full of nourishment, nutrients. They need good soil, right? Um, so if we care about other sentient beings and we care about ourselves, then it makes it's the logical follow-on is to care about the physical environment upon which sustains them and supports them. So His Holiness is kind of making that point here, which I'm really happy to see. He says we should also extend that same kind of attitude toward the natural environment, and that feels right. I mean, it naturally, if you go through a forest and I don't know, there's a different feeling you have. If you just don't care about it, you're walking through a forest path. Like one time I went hiking with when I was in college, um, after yeah, after the sophomore year, me and a friend we drove a car across, and I went to college in Ohio. We drove a car out here. Actually, we came to what is it? Or Shoreline Amphitheater. We came to Shoreline Amphitheater for a Grateful Dead show. Anyway. And then we drove up to Oregon. Yeah, Portland, Oregon, stay with a friend. So while we were in Oregon, we went camping one weekend. And I remember we had backpacking. And my friend, he's 1 year younger than me and kind of a bit hyperactive and kind of macho guy. So as we were just setting out onto the trail, he said like he said like we were just starting our first day hiking. There's a lot of excitement. You want to go kind of a long ways. And he's like, I'm gonna kick this trail's ass, he said. And I was just like, what are you doing? Why do you want to kick the trail's ass? Just like enjoy it. Just walk and enjoy the trail. But you see, it's a kind of different attitude. Some people they hike through the forest with this. It's just like, it's just like I don't know, just like scenery for them. There's no sense of connection. They just kind of go through it as fast as they can, just as an exercise. No, but if you walk through the forest without, so in that way, it's like you don't care about the forest. It's just there for something for you to use. It's nice scenery for you just to use it. But if you walk through the forest with like caring about the land, caring about the animals, caring about the air and the light, it's so much more enjoyable. You connect with it. You can feel it. Now you connect with it and you feel like it connects with you and you really enjoy it. No? So I think that's what His Holiness said. We should extend that kind of attitude towards the natural environment. So this relates to another thing that, for me, it helped shape a lot I don't know, some ideas, especially about how as a culture, some thoughts, we all grow up in a specific culture, right? And I think as we go through life, like oftentimes by traveling or reading about the lives of people from a very different culture, we start to realize how our own culture has shaped our ideas and our way of seeing things, our way of relating to the environment and other people. So one time when I was in college, I mean, that's a big part of what college is about, expose you to other cultures, especially liberal arts college. But while I was in college, I read this book, Black Elk Speaks. You might have heard. It's a quite famous book by a Native American shaman, Black Elk. I think, yeah, Black Elk is his name. He's, I think, a Dakota Sioux, I believe. But, and he lived around, I think, around the turn of the 20th century. So, I mean, like late 1800s, early 1900s. So he grew up at a time when the white kind of settlers were still far away. And he saw them come and kind of take over the whole land. So the way he speaks in that book is very moving, but he just speaks about, to him, this whole like Western culture is a completely foreign thing, and he's watching it come across, the Great Plains of America. And to him, it just looks like a beast, like this machine that's just coming. And can you imagine? I mean, seeing people make railroads across the plains and then shoot all the bison and then, fence off the land and dig up everything and grow crops. And it's just a completely foreign thing. And so the way he describes Western culture, it's really kind of it makes you pause. It really is kind of like, makes you think, oh, what, is there some truth to that? Like, what is he talking about? And he has the same perception that it's just these people who are just kind of driven by blind greed and total on not caring about the environment. Because from his perspective, as a Dakota Sioux, and especially as like a shaman, a spiritual person, there's this deep sense of like, spiritual and physical connection with the natural environment. I mean, everything, every blade of grass, every tree, every animal is something sacred. It's a creation of, God, and they're, I mean, not Christian God, but their kind of creator God. Which, I mean, which brings me another question is interesting to ask. I think ourselves who grew up, in a Christian culture. I mean, culture is basically largely shaped by Christian ideas, is because we also feel like the natural environment is a creation of God, But why don't we relate it? Why don't we give it the natural environment the same kind, understanding that in light of that, thinking about, the earth, the sky, the trees, the plants, the animals are all creations of the Christian God. Why don't we relate it to it in the same way as like the Native American Indians? Like the way it's like the way we relate to our God is very different. No? Um, so yeah, but he also, I mean, I think what he shared in common with His Holiness is seeing that this destruction of the natural environment is due to a lack of caring about the natural environment, and it's due to seeing the environment as just something for us to use for our selfish ends as individuals and as a species, right? Um, then yeah, maybe so I can just throw in. I mean, then the well, I think His Holiness will say. So let's read His Holiness next quote. So this next quote is from a message. It's actually a letter that His Holiness wrote to this COP26 UN conference. I think it was in Copenhagen, and to the yeah, I don't know. I forget. I don't know why. I forget the year. Anyway, it was a few years ago. Yeah. Holiness says global warming is an urgent reality. None of us is able to change the past, but we are all in a position to contribute to a better future. Um, Indeed, we have a responsibility to ourselves and to the more than 7 billion human beings alive today to ensure that all of us can continue to live in peace and safety. With hope and determination, we must take care of both our own lives and those of all our neighbors. So that's a very hopeful, like positive message. Um, I think, especially these days, especially when I talk to young people, like I was just before I came here, I was in Nepal, and there's one um, young German woman who became ordained recently and is studying in the Tibetan nunnery there in Kathmandu. She's probably, I don't know, between 25 and 30, I think. But the study program is very long. It's like, 19 years, 20 years long. Um, and she's just at the beginning. So I was kind of asking her if she, wanted to finish the whole thing. And she said something I never heard anyone say before, which is like, are you for real? Do you think, we'll even be able to like kind of I'll even be able to stay here in Nepal and study for that long? Because of the climate crisis, her view is that like, things are going to go haywire kind of around the world before, within 15, 20 years, and that there's no way um, she'd be able to keep in a study program like that, which, yeah, I don't know. I'm still a little skeptical that that's really the case because, I mean, humans have an amazing ability to adapt to new circumstances. But yeah, it's a definite something to think about. But um, mm, well, I guess maybe I can throw in mm, well a little data here. So one of like for Nepal, it's in the Himalayas, right? Um, and a lot of their water. One of the things I did a little bit of research about because it's something His Holiness mentions a lot is about how with the climate warming, then the ice caps are melting. We've all heard about. But usually we think about the Arctic and the Antarctic and in Greenland, because if those melt, the sea level will rise so much, um, and that'll cause massive chaos. But one thing that's not mentioned so often and has not researched so much because both the Indians and the Chinese kind of, especially the Chinese, they don't want to give people access to research is the glaciers in Tibet, the Tibetan Plateau. So it's the third largest um, concentration of what do you say? What's not salt water? Fresh water. Thank you. Yeah, fresh water in ice and snow in the world now, from the Antarctic. Third largest is Tibetan Plateau. And some of the major rivers in the world which feed, which supply water to, well, 1.5 between 1.5 and 2 billion people, flow from that plateau. Right. There's the Yangtze River, the Mekong, um, the Brahmaputra, the Ganges River, the Indus River over in Pakistan. There's like 6 major rivers, all that flow from that plateau and are fed by the glaciers on that plateau. So those glaciers are receding at like something like 3 times the rate of, just like the 2 poles, like 3 times the rate. Also because it's in the tropics and they're very high, so the sun's um, rays are very intense, and then also because there's a lot of dust from the Indian plains that settles on, and then that causes the sunlight to be absorbed. So they're melting very fast. So it's predicted by 2080, those glaciers will mostly be gone. So, and I mean, but those rivers are not only fed by glaciers, right? They're also fed by rainfall. But many of them are, 50 to 60% fed by glacier runoff. So can you imagine when those rivers, half dry up? It can cause, major disruption to food production, especially in just access to water. I know a few years ago, probably about 5 years ago, in my monastery in South India, where I lived, for a few years in a row, the monsoon, because most of our water supply comes from the monsoon rains, just 3 months a year. So, but it's never predictable, like how much rain is going to fall. So, yeah. When I first went to the monastery, you can always tell by how the ground table, the water table is somewhat by the lakes and ponds around, because they're all very shallow. Um, so when I first went, there's quite a lot of, they're all full. But then after I was there about 8 years, for a few years, the monsoon was very light. And the rest of the year, there's not much rain. So they dried up. They completely dried up. Many of the lakes and ponds completely dried up. The really bigger ones just became very low and just like streams. And then one year, some of the wells in the monastery, the wells started drying up. So and then that was the first time I really got kind of a bit of panic. I don't know if you have ever been in California, probably many people had that kind of experience, but when your neighbor's well dries up, you start really thinking like, what am I going to do if my well dries up? And then you see people start having to truck in water and pay a lot of money, to get water from somewhere. And then you think, well, how far does it go? Once everybody's wells start drying up, then there's really quickly going to be fighting over water. So I had that kind of feeling, like you can see, it just starts to be in, and you can start to imagine how nations or communities are going to, because that's your life. I mean, if you don't have water, you can't live, right? So you can imagine how that can quickly become like war, fighting over water. Um, hopefully, I mean, but so yeah, there's so many scenarios like that with global warming. Um, the flooding, the oceans rise and then people move, or food production's massively disrupted and people have to migrate to other places. I mean, like if we think about immigration on the southern border of the United States is a problem now. Imagine there's like a massive drought in South America or something. Then like, if, wherever there's resources, people who don't have are going to be going there, right? But so there's so many kind of horror scenarios. But what I think is really important, what His Holiness is kind of saying here, is we have to um, not lose hope, basically. I mean, we have to do what we can, to find solutions. Um, no matter how bad things look, like what do you do? What's the other option? Just give up? I mean, that's not, there's no, that's not beneficial and there's no point. And also it wouldn't be satisfying as a human being. Um, so I think it's similar to, if we think about like our own impermanence and death. I mean, all of us are going to die eventually, and none of us know when we're going to die. But that doesn't mean we just like give up doing anything. It means in the time we have before we die, we try to make the best of it, the best of whatever situation we find ourselves in. So I think, as a human family, it's the same in this, in the face of all this climate destruction, which we brought upon ourselves. Even no matter how much anxiety or fear or worry we might have, it's important to direct that energy into looking for solutions and trying to actualize, solutions to the problem, even if it seems like it's improbable it's going to help. That's kind of how I was thinking about this session tonight. Like, one Buddhist monk at one Dharma center in the woods behind Santa Cruz. Like, what is it going to do to help, the global problem of climate change? But at least I feel like as a Buddhist monk and and thereby a kind of leader in the Buddhist community, I feel like I have to try to do something. What it's a it's my responsibility. Each of us, it's our responsibility to try to do what we can. Um, so hopefully it leads to something good. Um, yeah. So one more thing before we look at some data, which is the thing that really gets me excited about, is kind of learning about data. Um, but is the Buddhist view of the main solution to the problem is really increasing our wisdom. So whereas His Holiness was saying, the problem comes from ignorance, which doesn't see how things are interconnected in the world, how we're interconnected with others, how our actions affect others, how as a a local community or a business or a global community, how our actions affect the natural environment and affect other animals. I mean, that's one amazing thing, good thing that's coming out of the whole global warming phenomena is there's so much more research understanding all these different connections between just different parts of our natural world that we didn't understand before. And that's really, wonderful thing. Um, but just as the Buddhist view is that, harm to ourselves and harm to others comes about through ignorance, not understanding our interconnectedness. So in actual fact, like when we harm another person, whoever it is, actually in the long term, we're harming ourselves because we're all interconnected. No? Directly, that person might take revenge, but even indirectly, because the Buddhist view is much. One way, there's so many different levels and different varieties of interconnectedness or interdependent arising, kind of a Buddhist term. Um, but sometimes we harm others, like cheat others or lie, like think a Ponzi scam or something. We set up or steal from a company or something because we think, well, we won't get caught. So maybe some people polluting the environment also think, well, I'm only going to live for another 60 years. I need to make a profit in that time, and then I'll die, and then someone else will have to deal with the mess, right? But what's one thing I find personally helpful about the Buddhist view is that actually when we die, it's not like we just disappear. We take rebirth, and that happens again and again. So we're, the people that we're around, even if we cheat them or harm them and nobody finds out about it and no one takes revenge in that life, still we have the karma on one hand. Like what goes around comes around. So eventually, whatever actions, we voluntarily do, whether they're harmful or helpful to others, the result of that comes back upon us in the form of our own hardship and problems or our own good fortune and benefit and like happiness and prosperity. So so we can't escape any of our actions. And then so one end is karma, but on the other hand, it's like we'll take rebirth into either this world, this planet or another similar planet. And then we'll experience, what it's like. But even if that's not the case, I mean, most thinking about long term, most people use the logic, which is also as valid and powerful, that it's our own children, our grandchildren, our inheritors that will have to experience the environment we leave behind. So that's another kind of dependent arising. But in short, the Buddhist, the underlying kind of in the Buddhist view, the solution to the global crisis is mainly um, recognizing more dependent arising, how we're all interconnected as human beings, and as living beings with the animal kingdom and with the plant, all plant world and the natural environment. Um, recognizing how our very lives depend upon a healthy natural environment. So then the question is, well, there's different questions as always, but what do we actually do? So there's these two, I'll mention their names. I'm going to throw out just a couple of names of different people in case you want to do more research. These ones I found very impressive. Did I write down their book? I didn't write down the title of their book. Maybe Kai, can you look up? There's this Christiana Figueres and Tom Rivet Karnak. They're the architects of the Paris Climate Accord. Well, he's the man, Tom Rivet Karnak is British, and the woman Christiana Figueres is from Costa Rica. But they together, they were sort of the authors of the Paris Climate Accord. And they came out with a book shortly, I think in 2015, which I'm hoping Kai will give me the title of in just a minute. Exactly, The Futures We Choose. Yeah, The Futures We Choose. There's a really nice YouTube video promoting their book that they made, which nicely gives kind of the sense of how they structured the book. So basically, they look at the book saying, the book is, I haven't read it, I haven't seen the book, I just watched the YouTube video. but basically, the futures we choose, the idea is that there's two possible futures we're going to have as a human race. Either we we find and fully enact solutions to the global climate crisis, and we have this amazing, beautiful world in the future where the forest, half the world is covered with forests. We have greenery on every surface we can possibly put it on in our buildings and our cities. The air is more clean than it has ever been in the last 100 years. We have clean waterways, healthy food, and people live quite maybe simply than now, but very happy lives. And then the other alternative is just like the total opposite. Like the air is polluted wherever you go. Like I've been living in India 20 years, so I dread going to Delhi, especially. I'm sure you've heard of how in some seasons, I forget, but the air in Delhi is just horrific. Even in Kathmandu, it's horrific. You step off the airplane and it's hot and your eyes start burning and you can smell like burning garbage. You go outside the city and there's like literally mountains like the size of the one behind us that are just like burning, and new garbage being dumped on it every day. And the water, like where there's a river, it's just like black and smells horrid. No, nothing could possibly live. It's just so disgusting. I don't know how people live there, right? There are wealthy areas of Delhi where it's quite nice, but like there are crowded areas where people don't have much money, and it's just like, oh my God. And so much loud noise, and then the trucks everywhere and dust. It's like, so, yeah. So anyway, so many people, if we don't get the climate crisis under control, then the quality of people's life just deteriorates. And then there's, fear, scarcity of resources, fighting over water, price of food goes up, whether you can get food or not becomes uncertain, more and more disease, all kinds of problems. So that's what the idea of their book is. So talking about, but they give some very good, their advice for what to do personally to try to be part of the solution is, first of all, get educated about the whole climate change, which is part of what I'm doing for this course and what I'm hoping to help you to do a little bit. And then is try to reduce your own carbon footprint by 50% in the next 10 years. They say it's to make that kind of pledge, to think about how you can reduce your own carbon footprint. It's something I personally haven't thought about. I don't think my carbon footprint's that big. But you know, because I haven't been driving a car, you know, I don't drive a car, I don't travel that much, I don't use heating and air conditioning that much. But for all of us, the idea is think about how can you reduce your own carbon footprint by 50% in the next 10 years. And then some suggestions they give is to, you know, if your home's not well insulated, insulate your home. If you don't use eco-friendly utilities, efficient utilities, use more, you know, ecological, you know, refrigerators, fans, water heaters, heating, air conditioning, and so forth. Make your home more eco-friendly. And then a big one, which I think most of us can do, is reduce meat consumption. So I'll say about that, because meat production, it's a huge, beef production is huge contributor of methane gas, which something like has a more powerful greenhouse effect. Is something like, I don't know, I don't want to give the wrong number, but it's definitely more than 10 times. I think it's like 50 times. Maybe Kai, could you look up what's the greenhouse, you know, the heating effect of methane versus CO2, carbon dioxide? But it's massively more. But meat production, it contributes a lot to that. And also, well, I'll come back to that one. And then if your own transportation use, how can you make that more efficient? Like getting an electric car. Um, uh, so, but especially as, I mean, I've been living in India the last 20 years. And I see like, yeah, I mean, for that reason, my carbon footprint's been very little. Like where I live, there's no heating, no air conditioning. So you don't use that. No. Then the rooms, even people have that, the rooms are very small. People's living space is very small. So even they use heating and air conditioning, the space they have to use it is very less. And then most people don't have cars. No, they mostly use public transport because the population density is so high. Public transportation is very cheap and easy. You can almost go from any point A to B by just public transportation, more or less. Um, yeah, 25 times more powerful. Yeah. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. Why reducing methane gas is so important is because, yeah, methane gas, it causes heating in the environment 25 times more than CO2. But CO2, once you put it in the environment, it takes a long time for it to degrade or to get it out. It's very difficult to get it out of the atmosphere. Whereas methane, it degrades very quickly, almost immediately. So if you reduce the amount of methane that's being released in the atmosphere, its effect in heating almost immediately reduces. So I saw one climate scientist who was a researcher on methane, saying that that's what we should focus on now, you know, to reduce climate warming immediately, and because is to reduce the amount of methane that's being released into the atmosphere, and because it's not that hard. One of the biggest producers of methane pollution is leaks from gas wells and gas pipes. Oil, you know, the whole oil industry leaks from wells and pipes. So that's not that difficult to patch. And then another major contributor, something like a third, is the beef industry. So if you just put the waste from beef or also pork, hogs, into what is it, containment, and then use that gas and don't let it release into the atmosphere, that can be a huge reduction. And then a big one is from decomposing organic matter, like from food waste and stuff. But okay, but actually, this is not making use of my PowerPoint. Let's go. Now the data. So this is another awesome resource, Our World in Data. You see here. This is I don't, do you guys know about that website? You must know. Our World in Data? You don't know? None of you heard of that website? Oh my God, it's amazing. It's like if you like data, it's like a it's like an amusement park. It's a daydream. It's amazing, amazing place for data. You can type in almost any data related question into their search box, and they come up with all these scales and graphs. So I pulled up a few. So what I'm focusing on, I wanted to focus on, I have these questions. I was thinking, so I was saying, like, I've been living in India for a long time, and yeah, when you live in India and then you come back every once in a while, I come back to visit the US, and it just stands out, like how much we consume, like how luxurious people's lifestyle is here. I don't know if you'd say it's luxurious, but I mean, compared to ordinary average Indian doesn't have a car, maybe has a motorbike, has a very small house, a lot of people, simple food, like food is like probably going to be 70% rice, 80% rice, and then 20-30% like vegetables and proteins, and legumes. Yeah, proteins is included. um so, well, one thing I wanted to look at is, I think people who live in the US and especially don't go out much, or have never been out, they don't realize, like, compared to other people in the world, how much we consume, how much we use of the natural resources that are available to us. So, a couple questions I wanted to look at, which is what I looked up stuff about, is in the US, per capita, and then also total, our use of energy, our emission of greenhouse gases, our use of plastics, the amount of garbage we create, and the consumption of meat, how much meat we consume. So those are the things I looked at. So we'll just go through, I think 8 or so different tables here and charts. Yeah, looking at those different things, and yeah, just helping us reflect on, what can we do to try to reduce our own carbon footprint. So first of all, energy use per person. So this is, does it have the year? And so this is in 2023. Comparing, so these are the main regions I'm comparing: the U.S., Europe, China, Brazil, and India, mainly. So in 2020, it has from 1965 to 2022, right? So you see the energy, just amount of energy we use per person in kilowatt hours. The U.S. is way more than anyone else, right? So this is per capita, per person. US is like 80,000. The average there, I don't know, it's probably around 83,000. But just the recent average would be about 80,000 kilowatt hours. Compared to Europe, only 40,000 kilowatt hours. I know, like last year I was in Italy, everything's smaller. The cars are smaller, the bathrooms are smaller, the rooms are smaller, everything's tinier, which means more efficient, less energy used. No. And then China, China is massively catching up. Just since 2000, look how much it's increased. It's almost caught up to Europe. But still, Europe and China are half the US. US is so much more energy. I mean, think about, like, my sister, I know her and her husband. My sister got married, bought a big house, and had a child all in 1 year. That was about 8 years ago. And they have a big house. Her and her husband both have good jobs. But just to heat the house, in the summer, to cool it, they live in North Carolina, it's quite hot in the summer. In the winter, to heat it, it takes a lot of energy, right? And then, here in the US, the way, probably thanks to Ford and the auto industry, like the way we district things, everybody lives far apart and far away from shopping centers and far away from places of business. So we all have to have a car, which means we have to use a lot of energy to drive back and forth between our homes and our workplaces and our, things like that. So yeah, so the US is double Europe. And then, look how much more, look at India. How many, it's probably like what, 5,000 kilowatt hours, not more than 10 per person. So much less, so much more efficient use of energy. So much less use of energy. Okay, anyway, that's one. So as an individual, we think, well, how can I reduce my use of energy? Because energy is related to emissions, no question. So cumulative CO2 emissions. So this is just cumulative, the whole country. So this I wanted to look at, well, because, in the climate talks, like we always hear about, there's always this big beef between the less developed countries like China and, India, Brazil, saying, well, you guys are the ones have been developed since, the Industrial Revolution and been polluting the environment all that time. We've only just started. So we might produce more per year, but the cumulative, what's been contributed to the problem is way more you. And it's true. I mean, look, cumulative US 400 billion tons of CO2 over, I mean, way over that, right? Compared to Europe, 300 billion. China's quickly catching up at 250 billion, but they've only been doing it since the 1950s. Now, the U.S. started after Europe in the 1900s, and Europeans started, with the first of the Industrial Revolution, the 1850s. So the U.S. is way more, and the population's way less, right? So that's how. So if Americans feel like, oh, well, we're not responsible, we're only 300 million people. Well, the percentage of energy we use and the emissions is way more now. Is huge. I'm not sure. Yeah, there. Per capita greenhouse emissions. So it is coming down, right, for the U.S. That's the good news, right? So we started in 1850. It was really high. I don't know how that is because, yeah, I don't know that. That part I don't understand. Huh? Maybe, yeah. Yeah, but 1850s were, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, but it is coming down, which is good, but it's still more than anyone else. I mean, look, it's still double than the Europeans now, no, the per capita emissions. So yeah, Brazil, yeah, surprisingly, Brazil probably because of cows. China is probably because of coal. Europeans just, all together. Look here's the world average. The world average, per capita emissions is about, what is that? It's like 7 tons I guess that's per annum, per year, I imagine. I'm not sure. But anyway, it's 7 tons. The US per capita average, what is it? It's like 17 tons. It's more than double, the world average, way more than double. Europe's a bit more, but the US is like, way more than double, almost 3 times per capita annum. Yeah, so that's cumulative. Then here's, what is it? Greenhouse emissions include carbon dioxide. They are measured. Yeah, I'm not sure why I put this one. I think, well, because the previous one's just CO2 and this one's overall. But yeah, this one's just to give you average how much. Yeah, okay. So over the years, how much each year, how much being added to the environment by different countries. So, but look at the world. I mean, the striking thing here is overall in the world, how much it's increased since, the 1940s. It's just this upward trajectory, more and more and more every year. This dip is because of the pandemic, right? Then this previous dip is probably because of the, what is it, 2008, recession, yeah. Then it shot up, then the pandemic, and now it's going back up, right? So of that, and the cool thing, maybe I'll show you. I just want to show you this website because it's so awesome. These what I have in the PowerPoint are things I downloaded and I put it in the PowerPoint. But here, I'll just show you one of their pages. So like, look at this one. You can hover over and it gives you the data like for every country. No. It's so cool. It's awesome. The way this combined, and then you can click it and change it into a chart or a table. And then you can download it, whatever form you want. This is called Our World in Data. Yeah, it's a really awesome website. So, all right, let me try to fit in some more data before we run out of time. But see, the cool thing about this one is you can kind of see, well, I mean, the US's contribution to the world, each year our contribution is becoming less, right? So it seems like we're going in the right direction, whereas China is just going up and up and up, just more and more and more every year since 2000. At least the US and Europe, they're coming down. India is going up, but it's still like so far behind. But you can see why, India is saying you can't make us want to lock into controls because we're so much less part of the problem than you, um, uh, Incredibly polluted. Yeah, yeah. I don't think so. Well, one, our population density is way lower. Um, but right, yeah, there's better government regulation. But in India, the kind of pollution you see is like maybe not of it's so much going to greenhouse gases. It's like smoke, which is not always greenhouse gas or dust, no, which settles back down. So the rain, a lot of that, it's like more gross contaminants, no? That might be part of it, no? They do tons of coal, yeah. But yeah, I mean, also like a lot of our emissions probably comes from burning like cars, from driving cars, or huge meat eating. Like that's one thing. India has a very small meat industry, but we have a lot of our greenhouse emissions probably come from our beef, pork, poultry industry. But I don't know. It's a good question. I don't really know. I don't know the answers now. I'm just starting to study this stuff myself. So. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, yeah. We'll talk more about the meat. That's coming. Now I want to talk about plastics, though. um, so here, plastic waste generation by country. This is just for 2015, I believe. So again, the U.S., the darker the red. Look at the what is it? The scale on the bottom. More than 25 million tons is the dark blue. The U.S. So here, if I was on the website, you'd hover over and it'd give you the exact number. But the U.S. and China are the two biggest producers of plastics in the world. I was surprised by that. I didn't think the U.S. produced that much plastic. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's because there are just a bunch of trees up there now. Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. So what is it? These measures are total plastic waste generation prior to management, and therefore does not represent the quantity of plastic at risk of polluting waterways. So this is not pollution; it's just gross production of plastic. The U.S. actually, probably compared to other countries, we manage our plastic pretty well. It ends up being in landfills or recycled or something. Actually, not much of it's recycled. You'll see plastic waste generation, but per capita, right? Daily on a daily basis, daily plastic waste generation per person measured in kilograms per day. So this is a measure all of the overall per capita plastic waste generation rate prior to waste management, recycling or incineration. It does not therefore directly indicate the risk of pollution to waterways. But the US, 0.34 kilograms per day per person. And no, it's so hard. I know. I know. Yeah. I know last year I stayed in Aptos for like a month, and I went grocery shopping a couple times. Just coming from, and in India, when you go buy fruits and vegetables, it's just like a stall on the side of the road, and there's piles of fruits and the vegetables, and you weigh them. Usually, they'll give, if you don't have your own bag, they'll give you a plastic bag to put it in, but nothing's individually wrapped. Here, you go to the grocery store, and it's like there's individually wrapped cucumbers, individually like 3 carrots wrapped in plastic, and da 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 da. It's like you can't, and then you put that in a bag. No, even like this, what is it? The new leaf or something like that. You have to bring your own bag, but everything is in plastic already. So it's like it's so much. Yeah, there's so much plastic. But we can pass laws to change that. No, if we want, to change. Yeah. But I heard like years ago that, I mean, I don't know how much, I don't know how much is true, but like in Germany, they passed a law that whoever's selling things, the more they have to pay a tax on the packaging. That makes sense. No, if you're producing something and putting it in a package, you have to pay the cost of the disposal of that. then it provides incentive for the people producing all that packaging to reduce, because it's, reduces their bottom line. But UK, I mean, look how much the UK is, so much less than Brazil, than China, only 12 kgs, per person. Canada, and then India again. I mean, India is just like so little plastic per person. Although in India, it's kind of like you say, like you wouldn't know it, because their garbage collection is abhorrent, because it's a low caste thing. Nobody wants to do it. It's a dirty job that nobody wants to do, and it doesn't pay much. So they just throw their plastic everywhere. So anywhere you go, you just see plastic all over. In the US, you don't, right? Yeah. But it's nothing like India, I tell you. No. But we're producing tons of plastic. So then the question, where does it go? We like to think it gets recycled. Look how little of it gets recycled. Yeah, that top orange bar, that's the amount that gets recycled. The bottom one is landfill. So like, and this is just the world over. This is not the US, right? This is world over, I believe. Yeah, this is world over. 50% goes to landfill. And then think, I mean, again, think how much more plastic, did I get that? Is being created. Oh, no, I didn't have that. Now that's another graph, but there's so much, the rate of increased plastic is like this, it's going up and up and up and up. And then 50% goes to landfill. This much is mismanaged, which means pollution, right? Going into waterways and stuff. This much was like probably like, I don't know, 15% is incinerated. I was in Singapore last year. In Singapore, it's a very small island country. They don't have space for landfills. They incinerate almost like 99% of their plastic, but apparently in like a very green way. Like they capture all the smoke from burning it, and they use the heat to do something else, and then they end up with this just very small percentage of the total mass as like ash, and then they put that in. They make islands in the bay or something. That somehow doesn't pollute the water, they say, but who knows? But anyway, yeah, we like to feel good about recycling our plastic, but it's not much of it happens. Okay, so then the next issue. So this is related to our diet and meat, meat consumption. Well, first, there's yeah, I'll show you. Maybe how much time we have. Here, I'll just show you this other from Johns Hopkins. I think I have this document. Hold on, better open. I was just looking up stuff about meat consumption. Oh no, I have the quote now. I'll just show you the quote. That'll be easier. Okay. Sorry. So yeah, from Johns Hopkins University Center for a Livable Future. Meat consumption in the United States has nearly doubled in the last century. Oh. So meat consumption in the US has doubled in the last century, nearly doubled. Yeah. Yeah, you'd be surprised. That's true. It might be meat consumption. Yeah, I'm not sure it's per capita. Maybe some of the graphs will show. But it says Americans are now among the top per capita meat consumers in the world. The average American eats more than 3 times the global average of meat. Yeah. So Johns Hopkins is not interested in like the environment so much. They're looking at personal health. It's how it's related to, I mean, livable future. And they're looking at the environment, but the article goes on. It's mostly about how detrimental it is for our health, how it's related to, high cholesterol, heart disease, obesity, all other kinds of like health problems, right? Um, yeah, okay. So back to our world and data. All right, here's beef consumption by type per country. Right. Yeah, so you see, yeah, you can see the poultry is the priority in brown. It's mostly poultry. Then the next one is the red is beef, and then the purple is sheep and goat. Yeah, you'd be surprised. For the U.S. that's very little. For most countries, it's very little. For India, it's huge. I think. Hold on. This. How can I? Is it? Hold on. I have this. Okay. Sheep and goats is purple, yeah, and then pork is like red. Other meats are gray, and fish and seafood are this kind of gray blue. So for the U.S., per capita meat consumption by type in 2020. So per capita, 58 kilograms, 58 kilograms of beef. No, poultry, sorry, of poultry per capita. So I don't know, I weigh like 73 kilograms. Yeah, I better be careful on that. So yeah, that's quite a lot. And then beef, 37 kilograms. Um, then yeah, sheep and goat is very little. Maybe some sheep at Christmas or something, right? No, this is in 2000. This is yeah, annual. I think so. Yeah, I think it would be for 1 year, in 1 year, how much to eat. And then 30 kilograms of pork. You know, my relatives in Iowa are pork farmers. They're happy, but they're happier with the Chinese, I'm sure. Although Spain is the most pork, interestingly. And then 22 kilograms of fish and seafood. Yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm not surprised. But look, in terms of the other countries, well, we're the top, and we're tied with Portugal per capita. Because Portuguese eat a lot of meat. I don't know. I've never been there. And the Spanish. And then Argentinians. Yeah, that last one. The last one there. Yeah, that's seafood. Oh, that's true. They eat a lot more seafood and a lot less chicken and a lot less beef. Yeah. Yeah, it's mostly seafood. Is their big one. Yeah. Whereas Spain, it's a lot of pork and a lot of poultry, a lot less beef. See, the only one, look who's more than beef. The only one more than beef in the US is Argentina. There's an Argentina monk lives in my house in Sar in the South India, in my monastery. And he tells me, yeah, the Argentinians love beef. They eat a lot, they grow a lot of beef, they eat a lot of beef. Yeah. But yeah, so they eat more beef than us, but otherwise they're the only ones per capita. Yeah, I guess that's the world average, I suspect. So look, yeah, so that Johns Hopkins was saying, wasn't it saying we eat three times the world average? So here it's not quite three times. It's 63 kgs is the world average. So it's more than it's like 2.5 times. We per capita. Yep, 8.3. They have beef. Well, they have beef. Beef is the big largest one there. Then the purple is sheep and goat. Yeah, yeah, yeah. India, I'm surprised it's fish and seafood because I didn't think they eat much fish and seafood. They eat a lot of goat and chicken. Almost no beef, no, because it's the holy cow. The cow is holy there. The Muslims and the Tibetans. The Sikhs, maybe. Yeah. Anyway, but this is so one thing is that yeah, because poultry. I mean the meat industry. Well, this yeah. I'm coming to a point. I'm coming to a point here. Just be patient. Hold on. I feel like did I miss a graph? No, I one graph I want to show you on their webpage. No, there it is. There it is. The land use. Okay, we skipped over the land use. Yeah, so I'll go back to this one now. Yeah, because this relates to meat consumption. So the total Earth surface, the Earth's surface, total surface of the Earth, land and water, 20, only 29% is land. right? 71% is oceans, right? So then the land is divided up how? 71% is inhabitable, right? 10% glaciers, 19% barren, like deserts and stuff. So only 71% of the 29% of the earth is habitable. So then how's that divided up, right? Habitable land. 50% is for agriculture, 37% is forests, and 11% is shrubs. So yeah, shrub. Well, this is forests, I imagine. Huh? Around here is forest. Yeah, but the shrubs maybe like up on the hill above, SoCal or something. Oh, yeah, yeah. Um, so yeah, 50% agriculture. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. Well, there does it have urban and built up land is 1%. That's there. You can't see it. Yeah, there, that little, those two little bars at the end. So 1% of the habitable land is urban and built up land. Yeah, I know. It's hard to believe. I'm surprised too. Yeah. And then 1% is covered with fresh water, like lakes and rivers. Yeah, only 1%. Yeah. Yeah, but that distortion might be a matter of what we notice, our perception. No? Yeah. And there's huge land. And even like someone's yard, their house and their driveway. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure how they calculate it, but even most people's houses, half of it would be shrub. No, probably. Yeah. Anyway, I suspect, I can't. It says this includes settlements and infrastructure. So yeah, I don't know how they calculate it, but I mean that's the cool thing about this website. It gives you all the sources, and it gives you a lot of information about how they compiled the tables now and stuff. But then of that, so of the 50% that's agricultural land, right? So 29% of the land, 29% of the earth surface is land. Of that, 71% is habitable. Of that, 50% is used for agriculture. Of that 50%, this is the shocker, 77% is used for livestock. Only 23% is used for crops. Isn't that shocking? But I imagine that means the crops used for livestock is probably put with livestock. Yeah. Right. All right. Yeah. My relatives in Iowa, they grow corn all their lives, and it's all for feed, for animal feed. But I think that's what they mean. So I think that land, which is used to grow feed for animals, is counted under livestock. So, it says here, this includes, in the fine print, it says, this includes grazing land for animals and arable land used for animal feed production, right? So of the 100% of agricultural land that we have, we use 77% to feed animals, right? So we can have meat and dairy. Only 23% to grow, plants that we actually eat. So there's a huge, that's where we can save the planet, basically. That's why. If we start eating like half the amount of meat we have, then you have so much land to grow more food, for people to eat. That sustains people, right? So now, like, we just have gluttonous, like a diet like the US, it's just gluttonous consumption, eating tons of meat that you don't need and using all that land to produce that meat and dairy, right? Which you totally don't need for, to have, and actually it's detrimental to health. All the water, yeah, all the water resources that go to dairy. Something like, there's some crazy statistic, like to produce 1 pound of beef uses like some hundreds of gallons of water. It's insane. So yeah, and then the global calorie supply. So the calories that we need to survive, only 18% comes from all that meat, right? So of the calories we need to survive as a planet, 18% comes from that 77% of land used to grow dairy. I mean, meat. It's ridiculous. 83% comes from plant-based food, which comes from only 23% of the crops and land. So there you can see, like, that's huge, possible to fix, no? And not that difficult, no? A hundred years ago, we were eating half the amount of meat we're eating now. No, it's not that difficult. But it's good. I mean, now, and there's all these great, fake meats coming out now. I just had a Beyond Burger the other day. Like my sister says, like, oh, that's as unhealthy. She's a Chinese medicine doctor. She's as unhealthy as meat, but you know, you grew up with it. You like it. Tastes good. And then global protein supply, 37. So global calorie supply, only 18% comes from the dairy. Even the global protein supply, only 37% comes from meat. 63% of the protein supply comes from plants, right? So then the big question. Oh no, okay. That one's kind of confusing. But I'll take you to a little bit easier one first on the website. Oh my gosh, I hope I can find it because the control bar here always blocks me from seeing what's on my screen, so I can't. Not that one. I can't. I have a difficult time finding the tab on that one. Oh yeah, here's this one. Oh yeah. Oh, okay. Oh yeah, okay, you can see. So this is showing, so this table, basically it's a little confusing. I'll just read the title first. The share of global habitable land. So the habitable land, remember, it's only 50% of the Earth land surface or something. The share of global habitable land needed for agriculture if everyone had the diet of, and then it shows that country. So imagine everybody in the world, as they want to, as they develop, they all have the same diet as the current American, standard American. How much of the Earth's habitable land would you need to produce the food to feed that diet? No, 137. So here's the thing this for. You need 137%, more than 100%. So it's impossible, right? So and that's what I mean. But think of it. I mean, thanks to our brilliant, well, I shouldn't make a sarcastic joke, but I mean, Americans since World War II. I mean, the United States as a country has, in many ways, been leaders of the world in a very positive way. Brokering international agreements, increasing food production, increasing education, increasing equality, in the workplace and so forth. We're the leader in so many positive ways, right? And because of American ingenuity, that's why we're able to have this amazing lifestyle that the average American has, which is really, it's really a wonderful thing in many ways that we have this comfort and this standard of living that's the envy of the rest of the world. But the problem is, if the rest of the world actually achieves that, it will utterly destroy the world, right? So now it's like we have to become the leaders in sustainability, which means you have to model what you want the world to become, which means really, I think we have to reduce or find a way to either reduce the kind of the amount of resources that we use, which I don't know if that means reduce our comfort, but it means have a different, more sustainable lifestyle, in short, right? And whether that means like reduce the size of our houses, reduce the amount of heating and cooling we do, or reduce the amount of driving we do, or we find alternate resources for all that energy, with electric cars and so forth. But whatever, if everybody in the world has the same lifestyle we have, I mean, this is just looking at diet, but it's a microcosm of the greater lifestyle. We can't, it's impossible. No, it won't work, right? Yeah, that's a good question. Well, see, the down here, the ones in blue they would use less than currently used. So like India, you know, if everyone had the same diet as the average Indian, which I know I lived in India 20 years. Yeah, it might have shortened my life a little bit, I think, but the food was good. I mean, the food is pretty good. I mean, nice Indian curry with their rice and chapati, it's good. If everyone ate the average, and they eat very little meat. So if everyone had the average Indian diet, you would only need 22% of the habitable land. So you can easily sustain the world. Its predictions are, and now we're out of time, so I should stop. But predictions are the global population will max out at about 10 billion and then start going down. Now we're at about 8 billion, right? So, and it'll max out in probably, I don't know, within 50 years. So actually, think of that. It looks okay, not that bad. We have to be able to feed 10 billion people for a while, and then it'll get easier after that if we're, still alive. That's true. It'll help immensely. That would take care of the methane, huge amount of methane, take care of, worry about, food production. But the greater than currently used is the yellow, just to go here. So Russia would take 81% of the habitable land to produce the diet of an average Russian. And then the orange, yeah, Australia is pretty close to, Australia is more than us. They eat more meat, I think. Anyway, you get just good if give you an idea. So if you're interested, go to that website, Our World in Data. So I meant to leave time to do some meditation to think about all these things, but that becomes your homework for the week. So, but I find it quite powerful now to look at the data and then take that back into personal reflection and think, well, how can I change my life to make it more in line with like the ethics of Kant. What is it? Um, what's Kant's main ethical principle? Anyway, the idea that you should live in a way, you should act in a way that if everyone else acted the same way, it would be good. The world would be a good place. Anyway, let's dedicate now. So think briefly by whatever merit we've created through this session, beginning with the positive motivation, looking at some of the words of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, thinking about some basic Buddhist approaches to dealing with the current environmental crisis, and then looking at lots of data about especially our consumption as Americans. So by whatever merit we've created, may this all become a cause, especially for pollution of the environment to be reduced, for all us ourselves and all beings to use our natural resources with responsibility, especially for future generations and for others, all the other human beings and animals who share the natural environment that we use. And then especially in our minds, may the care and concern for others and for the natural environment grow and help us to discover and contribute to solutions to the current global warming, pollution, and so forth. And then by this, may the world become a beautiful, peaceful, pleasant place, a perfect place for happily living as human beings and practicing, as spiritual practitioners. And then add any other prayers you'd like to add. So we especially pray for the conflict between in Israel, between Israelis and Palestinians, to be for the violence immediately to stop from both sides, and then to find a peaceful solution to this long term problem of how Israelis and Palestinians can live and share the land together. And then the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, may that also a peaceful solution be quickly found. And then all other places where there's warring factions, violence, may that quickly cease and peaceful mediated solutions be found. And then especially may this Dharma Center, Land of Medicine Buddha, which is hosting this course, may it have all the best possible conditions to have programs like this and many other programs to benefit people in countless ways and be free from any obstacles whatsoever. Okay, thank you all. And next week will be about secular ethics. Take care. Mm-hmm.